Good morning and welcome to our Reuters events Sustainable Business webinar in partnership with Tetra Pak. During this 1 hour, we'll hear insights from our senior speakers on how to get in front of the whole life cycle and climate footprint of packaging to realize a low carbon, fully circular economy. Just as a reminder, we have a Q&A box at the bottom, so please write your questions for our speakers in that Q&A box. Without anything else to add, it's my pleasure to hand over to our very own Editor-in-Chief, Terry Slavin. Over to you, Terry.
Thanks very much, Anna, and good morning, everyone. Just one big consequence of COVID-19 has been a huge increase in the generation of plastic waste. At the same time, there's been a sharp increase in the cost of recycled plastic compared to virgin plastic because of the oil price collapse. This has dealt a double whammy to the recycling industry and the global war on single-use plastics. So plastic pollution isn't just a threat to oceans and biodiversity, and we've seen growing evidence of its impact on human health from microplastics getting into our food chain. And a new study just last week or two showed that microplastics are even being found inside human placentas. And because plastics are overwhelmingly made from fossil fuels, its production is also a major contributor to the climate crisis, which isn't something that people are necessarily aware of. One study shows that emissions from packaging materials, 60% of which is made of plastic, is a larger contributor to global warming than even aviation or shipping. So in short, we can't recycle our way out of the plastics crisis. And yet alternative packaging materials like aluminum, glass, bio-based plastics, and even cardboard have a host of environmental implications. So what can the food industry, which is one of the biggest contributors to plastic waste pollution, what can it do to make its packaging more sustainable while continuing to feed a burgeoning global population? To discuss this very big and important question, I have Lars Holmquist, who's Executive Vice President for Packaging Solutions and Commercial Operations at Tetra Pak, which is Swiss-based, and it's the world's largest food packaging company. And I have Trewin, Restorick, who's founder and CEO of Hubbub, a UK-based charity that collaborates with big businesses as well as other organizations to create positive environmental change. While head of fundraising at Friends of the Earth, Trewin created Paper Round, which is London's leading community recycling business. And he's also a part of Tetra Pak's Sustainability Advisory Board. Good welcome to you both. Lars, I'm going to kick off with you. So last year, Tetra Pak set an ambitious goal to become not only the biggest, but the most sustainable packaging company, and setting new 2030 targets. I know the company's been working on this agenda for some time, and where would you say you are in this journey, and how much further do you have to go?
Well, thank you, Terry, and great to be here to talking about this topic. Yeah, as you said, last year we made a commitment to reach net zero greenhouse gas emissions in our own operations by 2030, and while setting a net zero ambition across the whole value chain by 2050. And just to give you a snapshot on where we are on this journey, because we haven't started it now, but those were the ambitions and goals that we set last year. So just to start with, maybe back from 2010, we set a climate goal to cap the 2020 impact across the value chain at 2010 levels, while of course our business was growing. And we reduced over that period of time the total emissions by 11%, saving about 12 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions. And we are ahead of our target, so demonstrating that decoupling growth and climate impact is indeed possible. Now, in 2019, renewable electricity use across our operation increased to 69%, And we are on track to meet our RE100 targets of 80% by this year and 100% by 2030. As you know, we produce packaging material, and all of our packaging material within the EU are already using 100% renewable electricity. And we are really addressing 4 key areas here, Terry, to reach the net zero greenhouse gas emission across our operation and by 2050 in the value chain. So if I can just mention these, the first is to lower energy-related emissions through energy conservation and improvement in energy efficiency. So installing, solar PVs and purchasing, of course, renewable energy. The second is partnership, which is absolutely key to reach both the goal in our own operation by 2030, but throughout the whole food value chain. So we are partnering with suppliers and with other stakeholders along the whole value chain, the food value chain, to significantly reduce the carbon footprint. The third point is to accelerate development of our low carbon, circular packaging material and overall packaging and the equipment that we sell. So here we are working really to help our customers, the brand owner, the manufacturers of liquid food, to achieve their emission reduction targets while, of course, keeping food safe and making it available everywhere, and at the same time reducing food waste. And the fourth thing I wanted to mention is we are developing sustainable recycling value chains via collaboration, again, with customers, with waste management companies, with recyclers, municipalities, NGOs, and so on. So that's just a little snapshot of where we are.
Okay, well, let's stick with the sustainable recycling value chain, because that's really what we want to kind of dig into today, I think. How much plastic is in your packaging?
Today, our packaging consists of 70% fiber, and the rest, that's on average. It depends a little bit on the package, and the rest is polyethylene and a little bit of aluminum in some of our packages as well. But at least 70% is carton or fiber-based. And more and more, we are now deploying polyethylene-based from bio-based sources. So it's not fossil, but more and more increasingly from bio-based. And the longer-term goal is to eliminate any polyethylene and any aluminum so that we have a fully fiber-based package, still meeting all the requirements on food nutrition, food safety, and food waste, but still be 100% renewable, made from 100% renewable, and of course being 100% recyclable.
Okay, so all right, let's talk about the recyclability at the moment, then we can get into the sourcing of different and design issues. But I wanted to ask Trewin, because you've been advising Tetra Pak on this. What are some of the the challenges when it comes to the recycling piece of packaging like Tetra Pak?
Remember to unmute, so that's a good start. Thank you for the question. So I think, recycling is such a hot topic because that's what the consumer sees. When they're disposing of a package, they immediately think of, is this recyclable or is it not? And that's quite understandable. That's the immediate connection. But I think the advice that we're giving to companies like Tetra Pak is that actually this is not about a war on plastic. It's about a war on carbon. And to address that, you need to go right the way back to the beginning. So what's the purpose of the packaging? Is it truly needed in the first instance? How important is it that packaging does other things to reduce carbon? So, if food waste was a country, it would be the third biggest carbon emitter in the world. So, you know, if you can have packaging which makes food last longer, that is, you know, that's important in sustainable packaging. So you've got to think the purpose of the packaging. How can you reduce that packaging to an absolute minimum so that you're not sort of spending lots of money transporting heavy packaging across the world? How can you make sure that you're sourcing it from as sustainable sources as possible? How can you build circularity into that process? And only after you've all done all of that can you then think about the recycling, because you need, that's further down the chain of activity to reduce carbon. So a lot of the stuff that businesses need to do is hidden from the consumer, which is problematic for the business because the consumer sees it in a recycling context. But there's a much bigger debate to this, and I think businesses and government and others need to broaden that conversation so that people understand this is more than just about recycling. But, you know, obviously recycling is important, and it's complex for any large multinational company, because, you know, even in the UK, you can go across the street and have 2 different sorts of recycling facilities. So multinational businesses have to cope with a lot of diversity in the collection process. They have to think about how their packaging fits with that wider recycling system. And then they also have to break out of their comfort zone and go and collaborate, as Lars has just mentioned, to the waste companies, to the local authorities. So recycling is important, but there's loads more that companies need to do. And as I think Tetra Pak strategy sets out that it intends to do, which is about reducing carbon in the first instance before you get to the recycling part of the conundrum.
And I guess there's also a question about reusability as well in terms of packaging. I mean, we're starting to get some questions in, so obviously it's people are wanting to engage on this. But there's one asking whether you're looking at introducing reusable packaging. Lars,
yeah.
Go, Lars. You can answer that.
No, reusable packaging, or that's what I heard?
Yes.
Yes, reusable packaging, no, we are focused on renewable content, but also recycled content, I should mention that. So we are currently focusing on reducing the carbon emissions overall, and the 2 main pillars of that is renewable, responsibly sourced materials, but also recently recycled PE into our packages. And we believe that those are the 2 main components, in addition to focusing on collection and recycling, which we continue to do in order to achieve that ambition that I talked about earlier.
Well, I mean, I know that that is one of your big sustainability challenges because of your because you've got the plastic, aluminium, and cardboard in your packaging. You've had some challenges in terms of getting recycling. You've had to set up your own recycling systems in a lot of your markets. But I just want to stick with the question of reuse and why that was kind of why you've rejected that as an option.
Well, I'm not rejecting it as an option. I believe that anything that any packaging company can do in order to reduce rapidly the impact that our packages have on the environment is the way to go. What I just said now is that reuse is not the main purpose of a fiber package. Having said so, there are many of our customers who actually label the carton as reusable and refillable. But one important element here, Terry, is that it's about food safety as well. We need to make sure, and increasingly so after COVID, because of the concerns that consumers really do have on safety and food safety in general, is to ensure that the products that we distribute are indeed always safe to consume wherever they are all around the world. And we do produce, or our customers produce, almost 200 billion food packages all around the world. And food safety is absolutely key for us, in addition to, of course, minimize the carbon footprint, focus on recyclability, and focus on food waste.
Is that something, I mean, Trewin, you have done some of your own polling on packaging?
Yes, well, we've looked at, I mean, the whole reuse debate is fascinating, and we ran, so just to give you an idea of the complexity of the reuse conversation, is we ran a campaign last year airside at Gatwick Airport with coffee cups. So people could have a reusable coffee cup. They drank their coffee when they were airside, and then they could take it to a collection point. It was then collected, washed, and returned. So you're in a closed environment. So theoretically, reuse should work brilliantly in that environment. They're airside. They're either going to take it on the plane, steal it, or put it back into a container. So that should be an ideal situation for reuse. And what we found actually was that there was still escape. So people put them in the wrong bin. You then had to collect them, wash them, think about the durability of the products for it to go around and round. And actually we found that we needed to get the cups to go around about 85% sort of containment rate to hit the carbon target. Otherwise, the extra weight of the packaging and the washing and the transport overrode the carbon impact. So again, I think it's a question about science over emotion. So, you know, the reusable packages in certain contexts are absolutely the way to go. But you really have to look at the carbon footprint and all the energy and the water consumption before you start to make those decisions. And that just shows the complexity in one airside at an airport. So for a global company like Tetra Pak and many others on the call, you know, trying to build that degree of understanding into the process is quite complicated. And I think there is a real danger that you can leap to the emotional response rather than the one that scientifically is the right way to go.
Lars, what are you doing then, talking about, you know, if you're wanting to try and avoid that recycling end of pipe issue, what are you doing at the design end to try and make your packaging more sustainable and more easily, you know, to fit into the circular economy?
Yeah, so as Trewin and I have been saying, it's both. It's both, again, to reduce the carbon emissions that are not only the packaging material, but again, throughout the value chain that it generates, and to promote collection and recycling. I just want to emphasize that it's both. Now, what we are doing in terms of designing the future most sustainable package is to reduce and eventually eliminate any or any fossil-based and only used non-fossil-based material. In fact, as I said, the end goal is to have a redesigned package which is based only on fiber-based packages, including the barriers that are required. I saw a question on that here. What are we doing? Well, we are basically going to develop barriers both for the food protection and in order the layers that are required to seal the package to make it aseptic and make it food safe through fiber-based materials and fiber-based supply chains that are sustainably sourced. So this is a massive transformation that we have, you know, set ourselves to do. And we are investing some 100 million euro per year in this development in order to get to this fully fiber-based package. And that has two advantages, Terry. One is, of course, it reduces the carbon footprint, but it also should fit into normal cardboard collection and recycling streams all around the world, where regular cardboard goes. So we don't need a separate stream for that packaging. So the advantage is, you know, it's responsibly sourced from biomaterial, plant-based material, fully. It reduces the carbon footprint and is fully recyclable in the normal carton collection and recycling stream. So that's what we're doing, and it's a massive undertaking and a big transformation of the whole liquid food packaging that we are responsible for.
Okay, I think there's some confusion about what bio-based materials, biodegradability. I wonder, Trewin, is this something you want to tackle? Not everything that's bio-based or biodegradable is actually going to be the solution.
That's absolutely correct. So, the first question is it truly, does it truly degrade? Because as you mentioned quite rightly in your introduction, one of the biggest worries about plastic pollution is microplastics, which we know is in the food chain and is spread, even found near the top of Everest and in the Arctic and Antarctic. So microplastics are infiltrating our natural environment. So, is it truly degradable, or are you just breaking plastics down into microplastics is one obvious major question. The second question is, does it degrade in the recycling and waste systems that you have? So a lot of the degradability needs oxygen to degrade it. So if it's going through anaerobic digesters, it's not getting that oxygen, so it won't degrade. So there's a question of will the waste system allow it to degrade? And then the other big problem is that your average consumer who's probably confused by the wealth of packaging and confusing messages already, that if they see something that looks like plastic, even if it's biodegradable plastic, they're likely to put it in the plastic recycling. And that actually can contaminate all the rest of that plastic recycling. So there's consumer confusion. And then anecdotally, although I haven't seen any direct evidence of this, it's well, will people be more likely to litter it if they think it will degrade and they can just put it down outside and it will degrade and it will sort of disappear, sort of like a fruit core or whatever. So there is an awful lot of complexity. Obviously, a truly degradable product has to be the way forward. But the jump from where we are now to getting that within the systems we have and the range of materials that are claiming to be degradable, it's quite a long leap at the moment.
Lars, how are you trying to make that leap?
Well, we are continuously exploring suitable materials for our packaging, which includes biodegradable polymers. But they have to meet the demands on food protection. As I said, they need to have the technical performance, and most important, as Trewin said, they need to have the environmental performance and criteria and credentials. And unfortunately, as Trewin also mentioned, biodegradability doesn't prevent littering, and most importantly, appropriate biodegradable polymers are not currently available. Also I think that biodegradation science legislation and composing facility availability is very unclear at the moment. And in light of this, we have chosen really to focus, as I said, on renewable and recycled innovation pathway to ensure that we decarbonize and that we drive circularity of materials and address the need for sustainable food packaging. But we're not saying that we are exploring. It is a possibility, and we need to ensure that if there is a viable solution, we will let's say include that in our pipeline. Yes.
Okay, let's just looking at some of the bio-based material you're introducing so far. You've been using sugar-based material in the plastic caps, haven't you?
Yes.
But isn't there a risk, as one of the questions we've had in points out, to biodiversity and some of the food and land use? If you're going to be turning over land to create bioplastics, is that not a biodiversity risk?
Of course, it is. It is biodiversity is a big issue, and we are committed to biodiversity, to address biodiversity and bring back biodiversity in every possible way that we can influence. And we are, as I said, committed to overall sustainable sourcing. This really means that sourcing raw materials responsibly is to minimize human and any societal or environmental risk, but also driving transparency and active communication across the whole value chain. So we don't own or manage any forests, nor do we own or manage any sugarcane plantation where most of the bio-based polyethylene comes from. But what we do is we apply our responsible sourcing practices to protect biodiversity and to promote sustainable land management. And we do this by working together with suppliers, with NGOs, with customers, any other stakeholders, in order to demonstrate traceability through independent certification, independent labeling. And you know, we rely on a platform of certification standards. Of course, FSC, when it comes to a board, a paper board, but also Bonsucro, which is the certification that we are using, the chain of custody certification in Brazil, where we source our sugarcane from. And we obtained in 2019, the first in the food and beverage industry, this Bonsucro chain of custody certification for the polyethylene that we use, the bio-based polyethylene, which really ensures, again, and I really want to emphasize that, full transparency across the supply chain. So it makes, you know, our plant-based polymers fully traceable. You can trace them all the way back to the origin, and we believe that this is absolutely critical.
So are you looking to increase that in your packaging?
Yes, we are already massively this year deploying the plant-based polyethylene in our packages in Europe, in Americas, and elsewhere around the world. So it is not just something that we have done it for over a couple of years, both in the closures, but also in the packaging material, and it's now becoming mainstream in what we offer. Again, we are the only ones who offer traceable plant-based polymers in the liquid food packaging. So this is very important. Okay,
so you also mentioned FSC, and you know, we've been reporting in the Ethical Corporation on the concerns about the rigor of the auditing process, rules that allow clear cutting in northern forests, which are dominated by coniferous trees in Sweden, Canada, and Russia. So what are you doing about that? And I'm just wondering if Tetra Pak is involved in the Science-Based Targets Network initiative, which is trying to develop science-based targets for nature.
Sure, let me take one at a time. Let me start with FSC. And yes, we realize that there's been a lot of discussion around FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, and especially how their scheme works in certain countries around the world. And we are a major user of paperboard, and we feel that it is really our responsibility to do whatever we can to help improve management of the world's forests. So this is something that is really close to our heart. And we now ensure that 100% of the paperboard in our packages come from FSC certified and other controlled resources. And we introduced quite a long time ago, I think it was 2007, we introduced FSC certification system into the liquid food carton. We were the first in the industry to do so. More recently, I mean, in the first half of last year, we ensured that FSC standards became also applicable in North America, complying with one of our duties as FSC member to help the standard improve and increase the scale of coverage around the world. So as a summary, Terry, this has really enabled us to deliver over 600 billion FSC labeled packages in the last 10 years or so. So, I mean, to conclude, we continue to see that FSC is really offering credible universal standards, and we will continue to work with them and other third parties, for sure, to ensure that our materials are responsibly sourced. And then to your second question, if we are involved in the Science-Based Target Network to develop the science-based targets for nature, absolutely, yes. We see the science-based targets as critical, really critical for us. It really shows a defined pathway by specifying how much and how quickly we need to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to pursue the efforts of as we all know, about limiting the warming to 1.5 degrees C. And we were the first company in the food packaging industry to have our climate impact reduction target approved by SBT back in 2017. And last year, we set emission reduction targets for 2030 in line with the 1.5 degree, according to SBTi, across the 3 scopes, 1, 2, and 3. So for us to translate the 1.5 degree scenario into absolute greenhouse gas emission reduction targets equals to a 46% reduction in value chain emissions by 2030. So yes, we are very much committed to this, and moving forward, you know, in December last year, we secured a place on the prestigious CDP A list for tackling climate change as well as acting to protect forests. And this made us the only company in the carton packaging sector to be included in the CDP leadership. So, you know, we believe that we are very, very much committed to this.
Trewin, what have you picked up any concern about some of the alternatives to plastic? Do you think that consumers are concerned about biodiversity? And
yeah, there's a lot of questions, and actually there's some really interesting questions flashing through the both the chat and the Q&A. So a couple of things. I think first of all, sort of obviously we've been hit with a global pandemic, and many parts of the world are heading into recession. So I think there's an interesting debate about what that's done to the corporate and public mood, and that's something we've been assessing sort of since last March. And I think when there was the last massive economic crunch, which was after the financial crash, it's fair to say that environmental and sustainability stuff dropped off the agenda for many businesses. That has absolutely not happened this time. The concern about the environment and sustainability has stayed very high on the corporate agenda. And I think it's because businesses realise, you know, when there was a risk on their risk register, such as a pandemic, which they didn't take seriously, gosh, the impact of that on their business is huge. And climate change absolutely fits into that category. So I think there's a desire to act on sustainability. And when we've asked consumers what they think, I mean, the first thing is that a lot of people are really suffering out there, and you know, they were shocked that there was no sort of food available on supermarket shelves. So I think concern about food and food waste and access to food has grown. And I think we're seeing a coming together of the sustainability agenda and the social agenda. And I think what we've seen is that consumers have really started to question more businesses about their ethical policies and what they're selling them. And I think it's great that Terry, you and others have really started to look at things like FSC accreditation, because they have to be the source that people can trust. But consumers are going to get very questioning about what does that really mean. So I think business must be aware that that questioning is going to happen. And then there's the whole policy and government agenda, which we haven't really talked about. You know, we've got COP coming up at the end of this year, and businesses are making more and more commitments to that. But actually, a lot of what they're changing is because of legislation. You know, single-use plastics legislation, Green Deal, all of those things are actually driving change. So I think sort of sustainable change is here to stay. I think consumers are getting more sophisticated about the debate, and they're starting to make connections between plastics and climate and biodiversity. So I think businesses are going to have the light really shone on them for their practices in this area. And I just wanted to very quickly, I think as Andrea said, she was a bit disappointed I called reusability and emotional response. I think I was doing that in the instance where we in the UK don't have a deposit return scheme, and you know, we're trying to build reusability into a structure where it doesn't work at the moment, because there is no deposit return schemes, unlike many parts of Europe. So again, I think it's developing the package is going to grow and grow in terms of business responsibility.
So Lars, maybe because we talked a little bit about this previously, but the impact of legislation. I mean, you're seeing the EU is bringing in regulations on the design of products to make them more easy to recycle, aren't they? What impact are you seeing there from some of the regulation coming in?
Well, I mean, first of all, if we look at Europe, you know, we welcome the European Commission's review of the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, the PPWD, and to align it with the Green Deal, the Green Deal objectives of achieving climate neutrality while preserving natural resources and ensuring resilient and sustainable food systems. So we work towards the exact same goals to deliver the world's most sustainable food package. So it's very well aligned, carbon neutral, fully recyclable, and made from renewable and recycled materials. So we welcome this, and our carton packaging and our processing technologies. We talk a lot about packaging, but Tetra Pak also offers food processing technologies that actually help to reduce food waste and make distribution of liquid foods cost effective and low carbon, while expanding the reach, including to population in very remote locations. So, you know, the revised essential requirement and new policies that we see, the new policy measures, they must of course strike the right balance between functionality of packaging, again, functionality, keeping food safe, keeping food nutritious, reducing food waste, and the overall objective of the waste directives, really to minimize the environmental impact of packaging and of course future. So the balance here is extremely important. But overall, we fully support it. And if I can just mention one other thing, which is the SUP directive, the single-use plastic directive. So in July 2019 already, we became the first carton packaging company to launch a paper straw on our portion packs or in Europe. And we've been since 2019, we have been really focusing on improving and optimizing that solution. And we are now rolling out a portfolio of paper straws in line with the SUP directive, which the regulation, as you know, comes into place mid of this year. And the other thing that the SUP directive drove was tethered caps, that all tethered closures and caps have to be tethered. They have to be fit to the package. And last year, we accelerated the action to develop the first tethered cap solution in carton packages. And we will be rolling out through massive innovation and transformation tethered caps to meet all the needs of our customers, brand owners, consumers, and the society by when the regulation is enforced in 2024. So yes, there's a lot there. We fully support it, and we are actively working to meet and exceed the requirements of these regulations.
I'm wondering, Trewin, in the UK context, now that we're out of Europe, whether this is these kind of regulations are going to be mirrored here. Are you getting a sense of what the UK is going to do on the packaging agenda?
Well, it's a bit of a mystery what we're going to do about many things at the moment, Terry, to be honest. I think, well, first of all, we have to realise we operate in a global market. So, and many of the companies that supply into the UK are global businesses. So, you know, the changes that Tetra Pak will make will hit the UK market inevitably. I mean, the conversations we've been having with Tetra is that their waste and resources strategy is still very much on the table, and they're pushing ahead with sort of DRS and looking at increasing the cost to businesses of the waste that they dispose of, and are looking to ensure that more of the packaging that we recycle is recycled in the UK, although there's a little bit of wriggle room on that one at the moment. So the mood music is definitely the same. I think the interesting thing is you talk about the UK. Well, it's not the UK anymore. It's, you know, Scotland, Wales, and England. And what we're seeing is that the Scottish government and indeed the Welsh government are pushing ahead far faster on some of their regulations. So the Scottish government are looking to introduce deposit return schemes quickly, and they're looking to sort of address single-use packaging, single-use cups and other products. And I think which is great, but the danger is you get different sets of legislation coming in at different speeds in different countries. And what that means is you just don't get any consistency, and you don't get any savings in sort of doing everything together, and you get confused consumers, and you're actually building more economic and environmental costs. So it's wonderful to see all these things happening, but they need to be done in tandem so that we recognise that we operate in a global market. And also the other danger of legislation is it can be slightly political whim-led rather than science-led. So again, there's a constant debate about, you know, where is the legislation going to make the biggest difference, rather than what's going to be popular with the voters at this particular moment in time. But overall, you know, the drive to lower carbon, better use of packaging legislation is a major driver for business, and is a good thing to see.
Lars, maybe looking internationally a bit more, big change in the US politically, of course. Any indications about whether the Biden administration is looking to move on recyclability and packaging regulation?
I mean, first of all, I think we all believe that it's great news that the Biden administration will, and that he is making this executive order to join the Paris Accord. It will enable some of the states in the US to go ahead with their single-use plastic directives. I know that California has pretty well advanced, but it's very, very different around in the US. And US is specifically a market that will develop some regulations related to both recycling and single-use plastic. So yes, we are monitoring that and ready to supply solutions for that. But also all around the world, Brazil, China, Australia, India, we shouldn't forget that we're very focused on EU, and EU is ahead, specifically when it comes to regulatory demands. But you're right, US, but all over the world is following and coming after not exactly the same kind of regulations, and it will require different responses, but all again is focused from our point of view on renewable, recyclable content and improving collection and recycling, while at the same time ensuring biodiversity. Those are our, let's say, commitments to ourselves and to the industry.
So I understand that you're looking to take out aluminium from your packaging. Now that's supposed to be the most recyclable material, and it's got a very high value. I suppose that's only if you can then, you know, it has to be extracted from the composite material of your packaging, which presumably that's a difficulty. Is that why you're looking to not use it?
Yeah, it is both, and we believe that, you know, carton packages are the most sustainable alternative, and the more we increase the carton content in our package, the fiber content, the wood-based content, the lower is the carbon emissions that they generate. So decarbonization, again, drives this primarily. But aluminum has a very important function in our packages, which is to protect the nutritious value and the safety of the product. So that is something that we are looking at. First of all, we need to focus on recycling, as you said, because it is a composite material. But over time, as we develop fiber-based barriers, we will basically take out the aluminum part. And we even currently have on shelves, meaning on retail shelves, a non-foil packaging solution where the aluminum foil has been replaced, in this case, by a specific polymer film. So that one is not fiber-based yet, but that is the first step towards going to a alu and fossil-based polyethylene-free package. So it's the first generation, and we will continue to work on improving and optimizing this offer with a number of sequential tests that you will see in the market. And you know, our decarbonization journey is in close collaboration with suppliers, as I mentioned before, and other partners across the whole value chain. It is critical. We cannot do this on our own. And I would just like to, if I can, mention a couple of these partners that help us here. One of them is Braskem, whose support has been key to pioneering the use of renewable plant-based polymers from sugarcane, as we talked about, but also Stora Enso, with whom we are exploring the possibility of building new recycling line to significantly increase the recycling rate of used carton packages in Central and Eastern Europe. So there are two paths here. One is to minimize and eliminate, and the other, while we do that, we need to, with our partners, increase the renewability and the recycling rates of our packages.
True, and just back to aluminium, because it's not a huge amount of Tetra Pak's packaging, but especially when it comes to well, the drinks sector, there's a lot of aluminium. But there's also sustainability concerned on the carbon front because it's very energy intensive, isn't it? And also it's using kind of resources of the mining of it. I mean, what's your feeling about aluminium?
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the trouble with all of this is the answer is it depends, doesn't it? Because, you know, the aluminium industry will quite rightly say it's the most recyclable product. And if you recycle it, it saves all that massive amount of energy and, you know, the bauxite mining that you mentioned as well, and the biodiversity risks of extracting the aluminium. But just listening to this conversation and, you know, what is a packaging made of? You know, what's biodegradable plastic? You know, we probably have an audience of over 200 experts or semi-experts in this field, and it's confusing. So you take that to your average consumer who's probably got kids running around in the supermarket trying to make a decision about what to buy in terms of what sort of packaging, whether it's recyclable or not. It's an absolute minefield. So if every consumer was taking their aluminium can and recycling it, and you had a truly closed loop system, then what the aluminium industry is arguing is probably true, but that just does not happen. And it's the same for glass, you know, milk bottles, you know, any type of packaging in a way is only as good as the system around it and how well the consumer knows what to do with it. And I think one of the areas where all industries and businesses really need to think about is how do they provide stronger, more consistent messaging to the consumer, and to help the consumer, who by and large wants to do the right thing, how do you help them make the right decisions? And for industries that are based around marketing and selling, they're actually not that good at it generally. And I think, you know, Lars quite rightly talked about collaboration up the supply chain, but there's got to be collaboration and communication down to the consumer as well. Otherwise, all of this effort and sort of technical solutions that we're hearing will not deliver the effect it could have, because you'll have a very confused consumer dealing with the product at the end of the day.
But I guess with Tetra Pak, you're a B2B company, so you're not in direct communication with consumers. It has to be, you know, the brands you're selling to. Would you work with them on communication, or how do you have any input into that?
Well, we do both, Terry. Primarily, we are working with brand owners and with manufacturers to help their goal, which again is to promote safe and available food everywhere, while minimizing environmental impact. So we do both. We communicate with our brands and we provide them with arguments to promote their brands as sustainably as possible. But we have also launched a 360 campaign that we will be running over the next 3 years, which is let's say, as I said, a 360-degree campaign, not only focused on consumers, all stakeholders, to really get our message across about the value of packaging overall, the value of carton packaging, and the road ahead for Tetra Pak's fully fiber-based, fully renewable, fully recyclable package. So we are now in a campaign that's called Go Nature, Go Carton. And some of you may have seen this recently in social media or even in traditional media, but it's only one part, the consumer education. And it's much more to emphasize the role of packaging, the role of carton packaging, and of course also Tetra Pak's ambitious goal, which is very close to our hearts, to minimize the impact of something which is so valuable and has been proven to be so valuable during the COVID-19 pandemic, which is to keep food supply chains uninterrupted. And we believe that that is our purpose, and we're going to drive that.
Trewin, what's your thoughts about consumers' behavior, actually? Because I think you were looking at their behavior during COVID-19. There was a lot of observations that, you know, consumers aren't worrying about recycling as much as they did. And
I think this is slightly borne out by the Tetra Pak index, which I would recommend people go and have a look at, because it's a great global picture about what COVID's done to concerns. And safety is now unsurprisingly top of the agenda, with sustainability quite close behind, but safety is top. And certainly we've seen that when talking to consumers, which is, you know, the purchase of plastics, as you alluded to when you started, has increased. People feel that things in plastic packaging are safer, and that is obviously not a great trend. But encouragingly, the underlying message is that concern about plastic pollution in our oceans is still there, hasn't dropped a great deal. It's just not front of mind at the moment. So as we progress, hopefully, out of this awful pandemic, we need to build on that underlying concern about what people feel about plastics and the impact it has on our natural environment, and start to reverse the trend, which is that it has dropped down the immediate agenda because people feel that something covered in plastic packaging is the safer way forward. So that, I think, is one of the main things. And the other thing, as I said, which has really shone to the top of the agenda, is the concern about food and food waste. So, you know, people are cooking more at home. They're thinking about the provenance of their food. They're probably worried about diet. So the other big message that we've seen, and we've been working actually with retailers like Tesco and Lidl on it, is educating people about food waste as well. So that's the immediate short-term concern. But as some sort of normality returns, concern about plastics and its impact on the natural environment is going to soar back up the agenda. I'm absolutely sure of it.
And obviously, if you had less food waste, you need less food being waste. But there is tension with the whole anti-plastic agenda, because, you know, and I know why Tetra Pak, you know, the cartons can provide some of a solution to that, but it's not going to work for every
and
food product.
It comes back to what's the purpose of the packaging. If the purpose of the packaging is to sort of boost sales and make it look fancy and above its rivals, then you know, that's not a great use of plastics and raw materials, which are probably going to get up when wasted. But if, you know, it's covering over a fruit or a vegetable or a liquid, which prolongs the life of that liquid quite extensively, then it could well be that the carbon footprint of that packaging is beneficial because it extends the life of food. And as you said, the longer that food lasts, the less packaging that people buy. And in this day and age and at the moment, the further their money goes, which is like quite a major issue for at least half the population in the UK at the moment.
How are consumers to judge what, you know, if you're looking at the supermarket shelf, should there be labeling showing the life cycle, you know, with life cycle analyses of those products, and, you know?
Well, I think we've been down there before, haven't we? I mean, I think we had a carbon footprint on a packet of crisps for a while. And it's like, it's a bit of, so what, you know, what does that actually mean? And I think, you know, there is questions about the efficiency of labeling, but it does work if people can look at it quickly and say, okay, for example, around health, the traffic light system on health, people know that green is good and red is bad. And we haven't got the equivalent around food waste or even sustainability of packaging. It's quite a hard one to crack because of the complexity of it. But as I said earlier, there's definitely massively confused consumers about what is the right thing for us to be doing at the moment.
And I guess just using less, really, it's...
Yeah, it's boring stuff. It's planning your meals, buying only what you need, you know, using what you've got, freezing what you're not eating at the moment. It's, unfortunately, it's quite mundane, but in terms of like environmental impact, it's significant.
So how has Tesco done, actually? You were talking about Tesco and Lidl and the food waste. Have they seen some wins there?
It was remarkable. So we've been running food waste campaigns for a number of years, and you normally, if you're lucky, you get a 5 or 6% reduction in food waste through some really targeted campaigns. We only worked with 56 of their customers, but they were cross-representative, and they achieved over a 70% reduction in food waste and saved themselves £16 a week on average. And I think what that showed is that suddenly food and the importance of food and food waste has become front of mind for consumers because of the impact of COVID, and because people are obviously much more closely connected to food because they're spending a lot more time in their homes and their kitchens and are having to think about how they can feed their family.
Lars, I'm wondering, okay, so you saw much more in this latest index, because you produce this index every year, right? How much of a bump up did you see in food safety in the past year? And I mean, going forward, once this all recedes to a bad nightmare, hopefully, and we get back to normality, do you think that that's going to persist, or what's your feeling about the future?
No, absolutely. I mean, as Trewin mentioned, food waste is a key issue that was highlighted by COVID-19. It has been, of course, a global challenge for a long time, but our data that you talked about really indicates a significant growth in consumer awareness that food waste is not just an economical issue and so on, it is an environmental challenge too. So there is a clear recognition in our data, and please look also at the index, that in fact, food waste accounts for, I believe it is around 8% of the total global greenhouse gas emission. I think Trewin mentioned that also before. So what we see is today, and especially highlighted by the pandemic, that consumers have an appreciation that packaging does play a critical role in keeping food safe, nutritious, available. What we took for granted in the past was not to be taken for granted when we saw empty food shelves in the beginning of the pandemic and so on. And this has triggered a change in consumer sentiments, and overall, also the interest in reducing food waste. And we expect, Harry, this awareness will be growing going forward as the world really strives, and we have as our objective to make food safe and available everywhere around the world for a growing population.
And Trewin, what do you think about going forward? Do you think this is a blip? Or
yeah, I've knocked around the environmental world for far too long, as you can probably tell by my grey hairs. But and there's always been waves of interest, and then it's dipped down again, and there's been waves. It's like the tide going in and out. But I think we're in a very different place this time. I think there's more companies like Tetra Pak are making more true commitments. Governments are coming together to act, and crucially, the economics is shifting. So renewable energies are now probably more cost effective than many of the fossil fuels, and that's gonna happen sort of increasingly in the future. So despite the horrors of the science, I'm actually quite optimistic in terms of where we're heading, because I think we're at a sort of fundamental changing point at the moment.
I think optimism is a great way to end. Unfortunately, which we do now. There's been a great level of questioning, and thank you for all your questions. It's been an interesting session. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you everyone for attending today's webinar. Thank you guys, Terry and Lars and Trewin, for this incredible discussion and for all the questions. And this webinar was produced in the run of the Responsible Business 2021. So please visit our website. The link is on the chat to see more information for 2021. Thank you everyone.